What if I told you that there's a tax you pay every single day that doesn't appear on any government form, isn't voted on by Congress, and yet steals more of your wealth than your income tax, property tax, and sales tax combined? This invisible thief has been quietly draining 30% or more of your purchasing power over the past decade, and most people don't even realize it's happening. While politicians argue about raising or lowering official tax rates, they're all participating in the greatest wealth transfer scheme in human history, one that's been perfected over centuries to enrich the powerful while impoverishing everyone else. The Romans used it to fund their armies. The French used it to finance their revolution. And today, your government uses it to pay for everything from wars to welfare programs, all while convincing you it's actually good for the economy. This hidden tax is called inflation. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how it works, why it's deliberately created, and most importantly, how to protect yourself from becoming its next victim. To understand how this theft works, we need to go back to ancient Rome in the 3rd century after Christ, when Emperor Caracalla faced the same problem every government eventually confronts: how to pay for an empire without directly taxing citizens into rebellion. The Roman denarius had been the backbone of Mediterranean commerce for centuries, containing about 83% pure silver and trusted from Britain to Egypt. But maintaining legions across 3 continents, building massive infrastructure projects, and funding endless wars required more money than tax revenues could provide. So Caracalla and his successors began secretly reducing the silver content of their coins while keeping them the same size and appearance. By 268 AD, under Emperor Gallienus, the silver denarius contained less than 5% actual silver. It was essentially a bronze coin with a thin silver wash. Roman citizens didn't immediately notice because the coins looked identical, but prices began rising mysteriously. A measure of wheat that cost 1 denarius under Augustus suddenly required 5, then 10, then 50 denarii under later emperors. What the Romans were experiencing was the world's first systematic currency debasement. The government was literally stealing the value from every coin in circulation to fund its own spending, while ordinary citizens watched their savings evaporate and their wages buy less and less each month. The consequences for ordinary Romans were devastating and swift. By the crisis of the 3rd century, inflation had spiraled completely out of control. Prices rose so fast that merchants refused to accept the debased coins at all, demanding payment in goods, services, or the few remaining pieces of real silver and gold. Soldiers' wages, once sufficient to support a family, couldn't buy a week's worth of bread. Farmers abandoned their land rather than sell crops for worthless metal, leading to food shortages in cities. The government's response was predictably disastrous. Emperor Diocletian issued his infamous edict on maximum prices in 301 AD, fixing the cost of over 1,000 goods and services by law, with death as the penalty for violations. The result was economic chaos. Official markets disappeared overnight as trade moved underground, creating massive black markets where real goods were exchanged for real value. Wealthy Romans who owned land, livestock, and tangible assets survived and even prospered, buying up abandoned properties for a fraction of their former worth. But the middle-class shopkeepers, craftsmen, small merchants who had stored their wealth in coins were completely wiped out. Their life savings, accumulated over decades of hard work, vanished as surely as if their houses had burned down. The empire's currency debasement had accomplished what barbarian invasions couldn't. It destroyed the economic foundation of Roman civilization from within, leaving millions destitute while enriching the politically connected few who understood the system and positioned themselves accordingly. Fast forward to today, and the exact same theft is happening to you right now, just with more sophisticated packaging. Since 1971, when President Nixon severed the dollar's last connection to gold, The Federal Reserve has created over $8 trillion out of thin air. That's more money printed in the last decade than existed in the entire previous century. But unlike Roman emperors who physically debased coins, modern governments use central banks to digitally create currency, flooding the system with new dollars that dilute the value of every dollar you own. The result is identical. Your purchasing power evaporates while asset prices soar beyond the reach of ordinary workers. A house that cost $23,000 in 1970 now costs $400,000. Not because houses got 17 times better, but because the dollar lost 95% of its purchasing power. A house that cost $23,000 in 1970 now costs $400,000. Not because houses got 17 times better, but because the dollar lost 95% of its purchasing power. Your groceries, gas, healthcare, and education all follow the same pattern, rising faster than wages because more dollars are chasing the same goods. And just like in Rome, the wealthy who own stocks, real estate, and businesses benefit enormously from this inflation. Their assets rise in nominal value while their debts are inflated away. Meanwhile, anyone living on wages or savings gets crushed. The 2008 financial crisis, the COVID money printing, and the current inflation surge are all the same Roman playbook. Create money to solve government problems, while ordinary citizens pay the hidden tax through higher prices. The only difference is that today's theft is measured in percentages of purchasing power rather than ounces of silver, but the mechanism and the victims remain exactly the same. So, how do you protect yourself from this hidden tax that's stealing your wealth every single day? First, understand that cash and savings accounts are wealth destroyers. During inflationary periods, holding dollars long-term is like holding melting ice cubes. So, minimize your cash position and move into assets that can't be printed. Second, follow the playbook of every wealthy family throughout history. Own real assets that maintain value when currencies fail: real estate, precious metals, and businesses that produce actual goods and services people need, regardless of what happens to paper money. Third, if you have debt at fixed interest rates, inflation actually works in your favor by making your loans cheaper to repay with devalued dollars. So consider this when making major purchases. The key insight from Rome to today is that inflation is not a natural disaster. It's a policy choice that transfers wealth from savers to debtors, from workers to asset owners, from the many to the few. The Romans who survived weren't the ones who trusted their government's coins. They were the ones who recognized the debasement early and moved their wealth into things the emperor couldn't counterfeit. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this opened your eyes to how the system really works, hit that subscribe button, because I'm going to show you exactly how the wealthy have protected themselves from government theft for over 2,000 years, and how you can do the same starting today.